this segment of the podcast, I will speak about the current situation of the Yazidi community. As many of you know, ISIS committed genocide against the Yazidi community in 2014, which killed and enslaved about 12,000 people within 2 weeks. And that became an international thing for a while, that people knew about it. But then I think, the topic really died with the news and with other things happening. But I think there's still a lot of people who are interested in that, what happened to the Yazidi community. And I think I will just start by the situation with the people who were taken captive. So ISIS took about 7,000 Yazidis as captives. That include women, children, men. Most of the men were executed. Women were forced into slavery. Some cases they call marriage, but it was really a slavery to slavery system, and the children were in many cases given to other ISIS families, taken from their parents and given to ISIS families, and were raised as basically as Muslims in this mostly, I would say mostly in Syria, but also maybe some in Iraq and Turkey and other places. From the 7,000 who were initially taken, about 3,500 have came back. About 2,600 remain in captivity, who are still missing. I think that the number of people who get released is really reduced every year. This year there have been only few rescues, while really that becomes just much more difficult to even find those people and bring them back. The other issue of kind of the Yazidi situation was basically the displacement. So the Yazidis, who are about 500,000 people in Iraq, were mostly displaced in 2014. About 30% of them have managed to go back to their homes, while the remaining more than 300,000 people still live in the IDP camps in the Kurdistan region and some in the other Kurdish areas. Of course, the Yazidi recovery has been, I would say, in some areas okay, where, as I said, people have been able to go back to home. Some people are able to go back home to reestablish. Sinjar is coming back live. Live is coming back to Sinjar. I think not maybe as people wish, and there's still a lot of destruction. There's a lot of houses that haven't got rebuilt, but a lot of the Yazidis have managed to go back. And thanks also to the international community support in that case, the USA, the Germans and other countries, the Australians, Canadians, Netherlands, a lot of countries really, I think probably a lot of the Western countries have contributed financially into the rebuilding of the Yazidi homeland and return of the Yazidis. And that's why, for example, when we see currently all the discussion about the closure of USAID, that really affects communities like the Yazidis who have not been able to fully recover. But I will not kind of talk about that, but I think just acknowledge that a lot of work has been done in terms of the rebuilding, and a lot of people have benefited from that. A lot of the employment was provided to people. So a lot of this foreign aid that came from USAID and from other was really legitimate and was useful. Of course, there was a lot of waste with it as well. But the Yazidi community did benefit from the international support, and some were able to go back. I think in terms of the displacement, it's really probably the biggest thing now, that the world has moved on, but the problem wasn't resolved. The Yazidis who are displaced in these camps, and we will be sharing some videos, how these camps look like. These camps look more like prisons to me than a normal life. There's a siege around these tents. There's security guards, and there's people living in these places for 11 years. There are children who have born and now they are teenagers in these camps. There are people who were teenagers, now they are getting to marriage age in these camps. There are a lot of really dynamics have really shaped these communities to be communities of refugees, to be communities living in this really sad difficult situation, very sad situation when you go to these camps. The feeling you have basically being inside a fence, controlled. That's the first thing. Most of these camps are outside the cities, where basically you are not even close to a city to do even normal shopping. So they have their own shops, little shops inside the camp. A lot of these people don't even have cars to go back and forth, so they live just in these places. A lot of people had even, were forced to leave school because of this displacement. So a lot of human tragedy was just with the whole thing of being displaced and being displaced for 11 years. Now, of course, these people live only 2 hours away from their homeland. The Yazidis of Sinjar, who escaped from the genocide, they live in the camps in the Kurdistan region right now, and that's only 2 hours driving from Sinjar. But they have not been able to go back. And the reason is, the reason is, and I will try to kind of explain a little bit here in this podcast. It's a political reason. It's a geopolitical reason. It is really, I would say, international reason as well, international shift in the international interest away from Iraq and away from the protection of minorities in Iraq and support for the minorities in Iraq. The changes in Ukraine, the changes with Israel and Palestine and that conflict have really switched the interest away from these areas. Iraqi government was in the past discussing, let's say IDP's return, and they were doing some work, for example, trying to fix something, but for about a year, more than a year now, they even stopped, really, I would say, any efforts to even bring people back. And Iraq really being so, Iraq as a country that is politically divided and socially divided into a Shia majority and a Sunni second majority, and then the Kurds are the third majority or a minority, but the third biggest. Most of the decisions in Iraq are done by the three groups. Really, the minorities, Yazidis, Christians, Sabians, and others, have very small presence in the Iraqi politics and in the Iraqi decision making. Almost all the decisions that the Iraqi government have done was by pressure from the West and from the international community, forcing the country to do things like even if they were not, let's say, they didn't want to do it. But now that's, as I said, that's not the case anymore. The decisions now, political decision in Iraq, whether they are done through the government or by the parliament, they really do not see or that do not take the Yazidi issues and the minorities issues as an important, important thing where they can, for example, channel the funding to rebuilding. So there has been very little support from the government for people to go back. There is also the geopolitical or the dispute between the central government in Baghdad and between the Kurdistan regional government, where basically both claim these areas, those territories of land between the central government and the regional government. And that has been going on for years now, too. I mean, that has been going on since 2003. After U.S. took over Iraq in 2003, these areas became disputed areas between the Kurdistan regional government that took the opportunity of U.S. took over. They expanded to these areas, whether it is Sinjar, it's Mosul, it is places in Mosul, Kirkuk, other provinces, kind of in the north middle of Iraq, and they expanded to these areas. And then when the Kurds seek independence in 2017 through the referendum, then Iraq, with the help of Iran and Turkey, they pushed them back. They took some of these areas back, including Sinjar. So this really these areas, Sinjar, Kirkuk, the other places, they've been going back and forth between a strong or a weak Kurdistan regional government versus strong or a weaker Iraqi government. That kind of change of the leadership every couple of years. I think also that was the reason when the genocide happened in the first place, because these areas were always disputed. They were never stable. There was no one party, one group in charge of it. There's of course more into that, but the big picture, this area being disputed, having two government, having two two government, none of them seeing themselves as in charge. And in this case now, while Iraqi government is in charge, the Kurdish government they have the Yazidi refugees, they have the camps, they have the influence over the political decision making in these places in Iraq in general. As a result of that, we see lack of interest in bringing Yazidis back to their homeland. And I think this is very, human rights wise or human rights speaking, this is really something people should think about and should see. A community who suffered a genocide, who have their people killed and enslaved, but not only that, the result of it, they are displaced, they cannot go back home. Or in this case, they are also not allowed to go back home. There is for about a year now, for almost about a year, both Baghdad and Erbil have agreed and have they stopped the return of the Yazidi IDPs. So there is no process for return. If somebody wants to go back home, they cannot go back home because there is no process for it. Of course, in the past, there will be the US, the Europeans, the UN will push Iraq to do that, to open roads, to allow return. But that political support and geopolitical support is not in place anymore for the Yazidis, and that's why we see the IDPs return have really almost zeroed for this year and for the end of last year. Another big development that we saw that did not take attention or did not see attention in the media internationally, which was the amnesty law. So Iraq did two very big steps over the past year. One was to end the UNITAD work. UNITAD is the UN entity that was created by the United Nations Security Council, which we played a role in creating it, to investigate ISIS crimes. What they did I would say a good work by investigating ISIS crimes, putting together files of ISIS leadership and ISIS members who committed crimes, about more than 2,000 files of ISIS members. A lot of the courts or the trials that took place against ISIS members in Germany, in Netherlands, in Sweden, for example, were partially benefited from the investigation of UNITAD. And that work was stopped. So Iraq put a halt because Iraq kind of requested that investigation, but then they stopped the UN investigation. The other thing that happened, really, they did not create any mechanism for the evidences collected against ISIS to be used. So there was no follow-up, there was no structure that was created to use that benefit. That was one thing where Yazidi community and the other victims of ISIS in the region, they were shocked by that. But basically, not only what happened to you, but also people who did it, the investigation against them stopped. But then that also became even more clear that Iraq has really moved on beyond ISIS was the amnesty law. So Iraqi parliament passed an amnesty law. And for the first time, Iraq has passed several amnesty laws in the past. But usually terrorism was not a crime that they would release people. This time, the Sunnis or the Sunni politician forced Iraq, or through the political deal they made to establish the Iraqi government, or this current Iraqi government, was that the amnesty law will include terrorism or terrorism suspects that they will be released to within this amnesty, a general amnesty law. And that's what exactly happened. Iraq passed a general amnesty law, and that general amnesty law includes basically amnesty for 13,000 ISIS members. And the procedure right now in the Iraqi courts is look into these cases and release these people back to the streets. So, for us as Yazidis, but also I think for everyone in the world should be worried about that. These are ISIS criminals who committed mass atrocities. And these are the people who will come back to the streets, which I don't think they're going to come back to be civilized, democratic, people. I think they will go back and again try to do crazy work that they've done in the past, or the criminal work they've done in the past. I think they will do the same. Just the way Giuliani was in Iraqi prison, he was released, and then he created this other Al-Qaeda group in Syria. And now he took over power in Syria. So releasing ISIS, Al-Qaeda, these terrorists to the streets, thinking that they will be normal people, it's just fundamentally wrong. I think also, for us as victims, just seeing that not only we were subject to these crimes, not our community was subject to these crimes, but also we didn't we have all this pending situation where our people are not back home, where even mass graves have been removed from the ground, where our people are Yazidis. So there's about 100,000 Yazidis have been forced out of Iraq. They've migrated to Germany and to other countries, and that's a whole different story. But and not only seeing your community basically vanishing or impacted in that way, but also seeing the people who committed it are finding their way out. I think that's really something that every Yazidi feels, but also every Iraqi who were subject to these crimes feel, and the international community, should have paid more attention. Of course, they've let this go, and again, I think closing this chapter on ISIS, basically closing this chapter, thinking it's gone, is a big mistake. Now. Of course, I think, with the closure of UNITAD, we knew that they closed this chapter. So when they decided to close UNITAD without, follow up as like a court system, without like a legal procedures to bring ISIS members to justice, basically it was just, even UNITAD itself was just investigation, just looked to the evidences, but they really just acted probably on 1% of these cases, not all the cases, but probably 1% of the cases they got acted on it. We knew that there is no interest in bringing ISIS to, a big, forum of justice where there are trials, where there's a discussion about this ideology, where why they did it, how they did it, exposing the ideology, exposing the criminals. We knew that there was no interest. And then with the amnesty really low, we were we kind of saw that this basically closing this chapter for good, that, it's like pretending that thing never happened, pretending that these crimes never happened. And now that, those who committed these mass crimes like enslavement, rape of tens of women, rape of children, killing of children at the age of, 9 or 10 or 11, releasing these people back to the streets, thinking that they will be normal. I mean, to me, that's one of the greatest violations to human rights and to the legal rights of the victims. And, also just to that, not only Iraq is doing, but the international community, I have not seen a single statement from any country saying that this is wrong. Justice-wise, releasing ISIS criminals back to the streets without proper justice, without proper courts, is something wrong. We have not seen it happening. But again, I think I mentioned in the beginning of this podcast, like human rights and justice really both are probably 5% of the politics and the geopolitics that go on in any country, especially in places like this one. So I do not expect them to fully abide by law and by the justice and by the fairness. But I do see this release of ISIS criminals, especially with the situation in Syria, another threat to Iraq. If thousands of ISIS militants are released from the prisons in Iraq, and then with Syria situation in Syria, that could create another big crisis, geopolitical crisis or security crisis for Iraq as a whole, and then for the world as a whole. The Yazidi community recovery has really been slowed down, as I said, by this lack of attention, the lack of interest from the international community to continue supporting the Yazidis. Despite the recognition of the Yazidi genocide by over 15 countries, despite the recognition by the United Nations, by the UNITAD itself, but also by the United Nations, we see that that this recognition does not translate, to action on the ground, does not translate into action in terms of returning or forcing Iraq and the Kurdistan region to bring back Yazidi refugees to their homeland. Other topics now, as the viewers, see, for example, the return of the Palestinians to Gaza, for example. So this creates this whole, now we have this whole situation. I mean, even in Ukraine, this whole situation after the war, even in Syria, northern Syria, the return of the Kurds to the northern Syria, to the places where Turkey have removed the Kurds and brought back the Arab Sunnis to these areas, and the minorities, the Kurds and the minorities from the north Syria. So bringing people back to their homeland after the conflict, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's in northern Syria, whether it's in Ukraine, whether in Sinjar, whether in these places, this is really another big question and big situation that it's hard to think about and to connect. So even though, let's say, Yazidis have the right to return to their homes, and there is no big geopolitical blockage that prevent them from returning, they are not returning, and there is no will by the state to bring these people back. There is no support by the international community, not enough support by the international community to bring these people back. So So the implication on that, the implication of Yazidis not being able to go to their homeland is really, to me, is existential. If Yazidis are not able to go to their homeland, and if they are forced to live in the camps, that means Yazidis will not have a permanent homeland in Iraq to live in safely and to a place to call home. And that's why you see, for example, Yazidis are leaving Iraq in thousands, and actually tens of thousands are leaving. So more than 25% of the Yazidi population have left Iraq just since 2014. And that number is going to be on the rise. So Yazidis are trying to leave their homeland. And one of the reasons is people not able to go back. So I think, I think with the Yazidi community not being able to go back, that is one of the biggest blockages of Yazidi recoveries from the genocide. And thank you so much for your time listening and watching this podcast.